All right, Legal Research 1. This is your guide for week 1 of the course. Now, we would have met on Monday, but it's Martin Luther King Day and the college is closed. That does not mean you do not have work to do. This class is the most important class in the curriculum, in the paralegal curriculum. You have to do work. For each week, my intention is to create one of these guides that I'll post either in video or and audio, Podbean, podcast, and on YouTube, probably both formats, but I don't always have control over the technical abilities and what I have available in my classroom / office here working remotely from home. Typically, I will be just to my right is an old stand-up drafting table desk that I bought during the early part of COVID, and I've equipped it, and you'll appear on a big screen TV that I mounted on the wall. And it'll be like the teaching station in the classroom. But for these guides, I likely just do it right here at the desk. I have it equipped with a microphone that helps with getting the audio to podcast. And what I'll do is go through and refer to the slides that I provide on Blackboard, and you can just follow along. I recommend that you follow along with the slides, that you have read the textbook chapter. If you haven't done that, go back and read that before you ever watch or listen to this. I think that in this course, you should be aware of some things that I'll explain, but this is the most difficult course in the program. And it's going to take more of your time than any other course. And when I say that, I mean, plan on spending 10 to 12 hours a week for those first 3 or 4 weeks of the class. If you do this, by the 8th week, you'll find that you're in a much different place. If you do not put in the time and effort, you probably won't be with us in the 8th week. Now, this is true for everybody. I had to take a class very similar to this to become a lawyer. Legal research isn't something that you can just read about and do. So mark my words, plan on spending up to 10 hours a week in the initial weeks until you develop some language and skills and familiarity with the resources and some ability to do things in a more efficient, quicker manner. Now, if you do those things as I suggest, you'll build those skills and you'll be okay. If you choose to do these things as you see fit, nothing I can do to help you. Not a thing. I can't make a guarantee that if you do the things that I ask you to do and suggest you do, that you will become a proficient and efficient researcher. Researching is to some degree a skill. Some of us are better at it than others, but all of us can get to the same answers if we follow the process and put in the work. And that requires effort, focus, effort, consistent focus and effort. So I just want to be very clear with that before I get started on the content. Now, I'm going to move to the content, and I assume you have read chapter 1. I would also suggest that you have the PowerPoint slides available, and hopefully you've read through those PowerPoint slides and use those as a guide for your notes. I suggest you take notes. For this class, you should take notes. For every class, you should take notes. The fact that we're not sitting in a classroom where I'd be looking at you and wondering why you're not taking notes does not make that expectation any different. When you show up for the live portion of this class, and the live portion occurs on Zoom, 6 p.m. every Monday night, and there'll be a link posted to Blackboard. It'll be the same link every week. You'll be expected to log in. The expectations are as follows. Have your camera on. Be sitting at a place where you're sitting up, not laying on a bed, not lounging on a couch. Be sitting in a place where hopefully you have the ability to hear me and I have the ability to hear you, and there's not a lot of interruptions. Now, I understand you're at home for this class or not at ICC in a classroom, and it's a much different expectation. I also understand that many of you have other things going on in your house. The room you see me in is the smallest of our bedrooms in our house. Our kids used to call it the crappy bedroom. It was the bedroom. It's not crappy at all, actually. It's got some high ceilings for a person my size. I like that. It's got some nice light. It's definitely the smallest of the bedrooms. But I'm in the bedroom. I'm on a desk that, was discarded by Illinois Central College and I found in a warehouse a few years ago and bought for 15 bucks. I'm not in any way in my ideal working environment, and I'd much rather be with you in the classroom, but we're not. But I'm in a place where it can be quiet. I'm in a place where I can pay attention to you and you can pay attention to me. So work and find that place. Okay. I understand that you may have kids walking through, you may not have a place. I'll tell you that as time's gone on with this, the most successful students have found that place. And, sometimes I remember a student last semester who started out at the beginning of the semester in the basement, in the dingy, dark basement next to the washer and dryer, because that was the only place she could find that was quiet. And over time, then her family helped create a place where she could do her work. But even then, there were times where kids might come in the room. That's okay. I'm not going to get freaked out about that. I've had in the classroom, I've had students that had to bring their kid to class because of whatever reason. Not always ideal, but it is what it is. And I have kids. My wife and I collectively have 6 kids. We understand that. I wholly understand that. If you need to get something to eat, by all means, eat. Don't let it be a distraction. I've had a student in this Zoom environment attempt to eat a 6-course meal and ice cream with chocolate syrup dripping all over the place, and was a total distraction to me and everybody else. And that's not acceptable. So the idea is you're paying attention and you're in an environment and you create an environment that you can take notes and participate and learn the things you need to learn for this and every one of my other classes and any other class in the paralegal program, and hopefully for any class you attend in this way for ICC. So that's kind of our expectations. And let me get to what we're really here for, the material. So as I said, you'd be wise to read through the PowerPoint slides I provided before you read the textbook chapter, and then read those slides again after you read the textbook chapter, and have those slides available as you're listening to or watching this presentation. And remember, these are slides that you can use as an outline for your notes. But in this course especially, and probably in all of our paralegal courses, you're developing language. So these are some opportunities to help you learn and memorize and grasp these concepts and terms. You're learning a whole new language, a whole new process. It's foreign to you. And there's no shortcut in learning any of this. There's no shortcut. And there's no way that you can be successful in this course or as a paralegal if you don't commit your time and effort to these basics. This is the foundation for all the other things you're going to do in the law. If you put in the time now, the more complicated tasks expected of you later in the semester are going to be much easier, and I promise that. I can tell you, I've been teaching this class now. This is my 24th year teaching this class. I learned legal research, well over 30 years ago now. Your classmates, your fellow classmates, or your neighbor, or even your boss if you're working in a law office, may tell you what they know or want to tell you what they know about legal research and how you learn how to become a competent and efficient researcher. But you paid to have me tell you. And I can tell you over that 24 years of experience, if you do the things that I'm asking you to do, your skills will be built, your language will be developed, and you will be successful. You will do things at the 8-week point that this week would freak you out. You will do things after the 8-week point and through the end of the semester efficiently and more efficiently every day. And you'll become more confident, and you'll just grasp, you'll do it. You'll be ready to go to legal research too. And many of you are taking other courses. Some of you may be in my family law, my wills, trusts, and estates, or other courses where you're going to have to coincidentally get into the law with no, break because you haven't completed this course. You chose to take those simultaneously. That's something you were advised into. This is actually a prereq for those courses unless you're in this course at the same time. But I can't water it down for family law, for instance, and expect that you don't find and read and try to break down statutes or cases. Now, that effort that you put in family law is going to help you in this course, and every bit of time you put into this course is obviously going to help you there. So it all works together, which leads me to, if you're following the slides, the bike ride. The analogy that I like to use for developing your skills in legal research is learning to ride the bike. And you see on the slide, there's a little kid. Kid's got training wheels on the bike. Every once in a while, there's somebody who's never learned to ride a bike or never even tried, but most people have learned to ride a bike. And if you haven't learned to ride a bike, you learned to ski, did you learn to ride a skateboard, did you learn to do something physical? Just equate it to something physical. The analogy is the same. When you learn to ride a bike or do any of those things, you're unsure of yourself initially. It takes time to find your balance. It takes time to become efficient. It takes time to be able to ride the bike without tipping over and skinning up your knees or your elbows, or worse. Likewise, once you master the bike, if you haven't ridden a bike in a long, long time, and you go hop on a bike, it takes you a little while to find your balance. It's a skill. And like all things that are physical skills, there's something you have to develop. There's something you have to use your muscles to do. There's something you have to adapt to. You have to adjust to. You have to learn a lot about yourself. And you have to develop those skills and then maintain those skills. Well, guess what? Legal research uses the most important muscle in your body. That big muscle inside your nugget. You've never done legal research before. You don't know a lot of these terms. You don't know the process. So you have to approach it like you did when you learned to ride the bike or whatever physical thing you learned to do. You have to do it with effort. You have to take time. You have to accept the bruises. You can't expect it to be easy. Now, when I learned legal research, we did have Lexis and Westlaw, but there was one terminal each in a 7-story law library full of books. And so you had hundreds of students fighting over these two terminals. But honestly, I mean, this is before AOL and dial-up modems. It was horrible. It was worthless. It wasn't really helpful. So we used books. It's sort of unfortunate for you, and one of the biggest issues you probably will have is that expectation that you can find an answer like that. Now, increasingly, it becomes easier to find those answers. Increasingly, resources like Google can be a secondary source, and I'll talk about secondary sources in a little while. Google can lead you to the law, but you have to be careful. It can't answer the questions. It can't analyze the application of that law to the facts of your case or the needs of your client or the request of the court, or more importantly for you folks intending to be paralegals, what your supervising lawyer has asked of you and expects of you. So you have to learn the process. You have to learn the process. And while we do it on the computer, and the computer can be helpful, the most important computer is that big muscle inside your nugget, your brain. No exceptions, okay? No way around it. Some of you will fight me on this. Some of you will have to learn the hard way. But you heard it here first. Moving on to the next slide, finding the law. After reading the chapter this week and hearing this guide, the expectation is that you'll be able to describe the role of paralegals in legal research, that you'll be able to explain the ethical duty to perform research competently, identify the sources of law in the United States, identify the classifications of primary and secondary law in the United States, and terms of binding and persuasive, be able to classify or explain what those terms mean as it applies to legal research. Now, as far as your role in legal research, some of you were just at our paralegal orientation and you met Michelle Weghorst, our dean. Michelle was a paralegal in my office when I was in private practice. And Michelle's efforts in legal research spanned this spectrum. It could be, I hear about or read about a case and I know part of the case name. And I know generally what court it came from, what jurisdiction it came from. And so I asked Michelle to come to my office and I say, hey, I just heard about this case. I only have this part of the name and the court it came from, and this is what it pertains to. It's about products liability, whatever the legal issue might be. And she goes off and finds the case. It could be something like that. It could be, Michelle, I just talked to a client. We have this issue. The issue is about this area of the law. I don't know anything about this. I need you to go and find the law. So she goes and she finds the law and she comes back and educates me, briefs me, brings me up to date on what the law is or where we should be looking in the law. You know, lawyers pass the bar exam, but we're not experts on every area of the law. There's certain things that we're tested on. We may be familiar with things, but your ability to retain those things is not infinite. It's, you retain things in the areas of practice that you're most familiar with or practicing. That might be one of the things that she may do. And then along the way, we were a litigation firm. I had things in state and federal court. I had civil cases in state and federal court. We had appeals at all levels of the United States courts at the Seventh Circuit. Nothing at the U.S. Supreme Court when I worked in that office. And then all the levels of state court, the state appellate courts or the Supreme Court. So it could be any of those things where you're finding law to make arguments in court and working with the lawyers there. So that's the role. It's to assist the lawyer, essentially. That's the paralegal's role all the way through. So that's the role of the paralegal in doing legal research. the ethical part of that, the slide talks about Rule 1.1, and Rule 1.1 of the American Bar Association's model rules mirrors the rule that Illinois has adopted in the Illinois Rules of Professional Conduct, Rule 1.1, and it requires that we be competent. Now, any of those rules that apply to me apply to you as my paralegal. And that rule requires that, we have this relationship with the client, and the client has to have absolute trust and confidence in our competence. Competence generally means that we have the legal knowledge, skill, thoroughness, and preparation necessary for the representation. You acquire the legal knowledge by doing the research. You gain skill over time in this course. Over time and effort, you will gain skill in legal research. But being thorough and prepared are things you can bring to the table today, from day one all the way through. Being thorough is following the process, doing what you're asked to do, leaving no stone unturned, being sure you follow exactly what you're asked to do and doing it well. Likewise, being prepared to do at the beginning of the task. I said you should have a notebook and be taking notes. Do you have a notebook? Are you taking notes? That's being prepared. When you get to the assignment, you'll see that I ask you to do certain things, pre-assignment, during the assignment, after the assignment. Did you do those things? Some of you will take shortcuts. It will show up in your final work. Some of you may take shortcuts and then decide, it's not a good idea. And others of you will do what I ask you to do, and you're going to build these skills, and you're going to have less worry or trouble than some who may not. That's being prepared. Proficiency in legal research is the foundation for a successful legal career. So become competent, and you'll be proficient. Sources of law in the United States is something you should know. And when we're talking about sources of law, we can bring in that word primary. We talked about primary and secondary authorities. We're always looking for primary authorities. I can only take primary authorities to court, and we have 4 primary authorities of law, 4 primary sources of law in the United States. Constitutions, and I have a plural on that. The United States Constitution and the constitutions of the various states. Case law, court-made law, any law that comes from courts. Statutes that come federally from Congress or the state legislatures. And then administrative regulations. The 4th branch of government, administrative agencies. And we have administrative agencies at all levels of government, from the lowest level of the local government through the states and at the federal level. You'll take a semester course on administrative law and see that. Those are the 4 sources of law in the United States. You should know that. Nothing else is a primary source of law. On slide 6, the slides I provided, it has a table that breaks those things down. You should be able to tell which things come from which branch of government. Hopefully more so than it's January the 8th of 2021, hopefully more so than our current president. You passed your Constitution exam and took a government class, and you have a general idea of the 3 branches of government, the 4 if you count administrative agencies, but those fall under the executive branch. But you should know and take a look at that table and be able to say, if I would ask you, from which branch of government did those primary authorities come? Those primary authorities are binding, depending on jurisdiction, and things that the courts must follow, that we must follow. And I'll distinguish that from secondary authorities on the next slide. Secondary authorities are only persuasive, they're not binding. Secondary authorities lead us to, or have the ability to lead us to, primary authority, to those binding primary authorities. Now, those are encyclopedias, for instance, we have for your use, and in some of the classes, if you're in other classes this semester, you'll be introduced to those, especially, say, family law and wills, trusts, and estates. The Illinois Institute of Continuing Legal Education Smart Books, I consider to be encyclopedias. They're a resource, and they do a lot of things that you'll become very familiar with, but one of the things they do is they lead us to those primary sources of law. We also have legal periodicals, bar reviews, law journals, and you'll be introduced to those in this class. Treatises and texts, we have a few examples of those in the library at the Peoria campus, which someday you'll be able to get to, and then dictionaries. Now, I always recommend that you have a legal dictionary, and you can find apps for a legal dictionary on your phone. Free apps. You can buy one if you want to buy Black's Law Dictionary. That's the traditional legal dictionary, but you just need a legal dictionary. So get one, download it on your phone so you have access to it. You can go with the free one. You don't have to pay for it, but if you pay a little bit, it's going to be worth your effort to have that legal dictionary. You need it for this course and all the other courses. Anytime you come across a term that you don't know what it means, stop, open up your legal dictionary, store that information in your brain, build your language. Going along with the theme of building the language, and think about some of the terms that I've thrown out here now. Binding and primary authority, secondary, non-binding authority, the different resources, okay? Start to develop those. But moving along with that theme, before I ever take one of those primary authorities to court, I validate it. I update it. I check with validation tools, and the primary ones, Shepard Citations is the one you'll have available to you. KeyCite comes from Westlaw. You validate, you make sure that it's still good. The law changes every day, subject to change every day. Be aware of the changes. And you don't always know all the changes, so you use these services to help you make sure that what you're looking at and want to rely on is still good law. You get a lot more on that later, but you should begin to recognize and learn these terms and know what these things mean. When I say validating tools or updating, you should think Shepard's, because that's the one you're going to use. The textbook talks about stare decisis and judicial hierarchy. To understand that, we have to understand that primary law consists of cases, constitutions, statutes, treaties, executive orders, administrative regulations, those things that we just reviewed. And anything else is secondary. If it doesn't come from those government sources, if it doesn't fit in those categories, it's not primary, it's secondary. Now, we have primary law from the federal government and state governments. Primary law from your state or jurisdiction is binding within your state or that jurisdiction. We have different levels of appellate courts. In Illinois, we have 5 appellate courts. Peoria sits in the 3rd district. If you're from Eureka and say Germantown Hills, Metamora area, you're in the 4th appellate district, or Bloomington Normal, you're in the 4th appellate district. If you were researching for a case that was filed in Peoria, your primary law would be case law from either the Supreme Court of Illinois or the 3rd Appellate District. If you're researching something for Bloomington, it would be the Supreme Court or the 4th Appellate District. More on that later, but start to get this in your head. Jurisdiction is both that primary law, and then it's also geographic. So it's going to be very, very important, and you'll be introduced to the court maps that you start to think in geographic terms. Law from another state or jurisdiction is persuasive. It's not binding. Doesn't mean the court can't consider it, but it's not binding on that court. Secondary sources, no matter where they originate, are persuasive only. Secondary sources are only ever persuasive. In the hierarchy, higher courts in a given jurisdiction bind the lower courts in that hierarchy. So the Supreme Court of Illinois binds, any decision of the Supreme Court of Illinois binds the 5 appellate districts in Illinois. The trial court in Peoria County, the circuit court it's called, has to follow the law as directed by the 3rd appellate district. That's the court right above it, and the Supreme Court of Illinois. Now, higher courts can depart from a previously announced rule of law if there's a compelling and important reason to do so, and we'll see that over the course of the semester. And then cases from the United States Supreme Court are binding on all courts in the United States. Again, that's stare decisis in our judicial hierarchy. And this will all come together, but you need to start paying attention to these things, recognizing the terms and thinking in these terms. And if you put in the time and effort to do that now, it builds like a foundation. So when you get further into the semester and are doing relatively complicated research tasks, it's going to be much easier for you. This pretty much wraps up where we're at, except for talking about your first assignment. Now, the assignment for week 1 is in the week 1 assignment form on Blackboard. You need to put in the time to complete this assignment. Again, you're expected to put in a lot more time at the early part of the semester, just until you get the terms down in the process and get familiar with Lexis and all of that. There's no way around it. So accept that. If you don't have the time, drop the course and pick it up again in the fall when you have the time. If you've taken a bunch of other courses on top of this course and you don't have the time, keep this one and drop one of those others. You can't drop this course and stay in family law, wills, trusts, and estates, or law office management, or any of the other courses. Okay, so just so we're clear on that. You can drop family law or wills, trusts, and estates to focus more on this course. But the point is, focus on this course. Okay? Focus on this course. Put in the time and effort, and don't be surprised that it takes a lot more time and effort than just a normal course. None of the courses in the paralegal program take normal time and effort. So read the assignment. Read it a couple times. Follow each step. I break it down into steps. Do not get caught up at or after the deadline. Plan your time. The first part of the assignment is due Friday by noon, which means that if I were you, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, I'd have on my calendar, where am I on the assignment? And keep track of where you're at. Spend a little time each day. Because if you don't, it's going to be 11 o'clock on Friday, and what you're going to turn in is a terrible effort. Plan your time. Use a calendar. We talk about that in the orientation. I know you probably talk about it in advisement as well. In this career, you have to schedule, plan, and use your time. And the only way you can do that is by your calendar. I have 2 calendars. I check them multiple times a day. I have to-do lists. I check it multiple times a day. No way around it. Now, normally, I won't go through and explain the assignment like I'm going to, but this is the first assignment, so I will explain it. If you're at your computer, you want to switch over to Blackboard and pull up the week 1 assignment. If maybe you've looked at it already, you'll see that it comes in 3 parts. Now, again, if you haven't read chapter 1, you're fudging on that. You better go back and read chapter 1, because the first part is for you to tell me in your own words, fully and completely, some things that you should have gained out of reading chapter 1 and listening to this presentation. It's the role of a paralegal in legal research. What's the ethical duty to perform research competently? Explain that. Identify the primary sources, the secondary sources, and distinguish primary from secondary. And then explain binding and persuasive. That's the first part of your assignment. You need to, I suggest you write it down and you go back and you type it up in Google Docs or Word. You check your spelling, your grammar, your organization, and you save the document so you can add to it the things you have to do after parts 2 and 3. Now, part 2 requires that you go to Accessing Lexis and finding the law in Illinois law in Lexis, the resources that are found under course guides and resources and documents on Blackboard. There's 2 PDF files. Save those documents. Have those documents accessible anytime you're doing research. Eventually, you won't need those documents, but until you do get to that point, have those documents available. Next, there's 2 videos linked to this resource. Watch the videos. Watch them at least once, maybe watch them twice. Use those videos as a step-by-step guide. They're on YouTube, so just like you would anything else, use them as a step-by-step guide. I mean, I know all of you do that at some point. You're making something, my wife works late a few nights a week and I cook dinner. There's a bunch of times I go to YouTube. How long am I supposed to put this chicken in the oven after it's in the Dutch oven pan or whatever? The other day, cable broke on a reclining sofa and I ordered one from Amazon after watching some dude's video on YouTube. And then when it came, I installed it. We all do this. So do it. Use this guide until it becomes second nature. Use this guide. That's part 2. That's part 2 of your assignment. And again, no shortcut. Do those things. Read those documents, have those documents available, and watch those 2 videos and have those 2 videos saved and available. The third part of your assignment. Now you know how to log into Lexis. Log into Lexis. Follow the video. Follow the PDF file. If you're having a problem with your credentials to log in, you're going to have to contact the help desk, and I include that information in the assignment. But that's going to be some sort of login issue that you've hopefully figured out after our orientation and before you start this class. After you do that, find the section in Lexis for Illinois case law. Write down each step you took to get there. Now, I know it's provided in the video, and I know it's provided in the PDF file, but I want you to write down each step that you took. The purpose of this is eventually you're going to get more efficient, and there's going to be different ways you can get to the same resources. You're going to find the ways that make sense to you. Finding your balance, riding the bike. Okay? After you found Illinois case law, the section of the database for Illinois case law, I want you to perform some research, and I spell that out in step 2 under part 3. After you find your case, I'm telling you to read it 2 times before summarizing it, and this is important, in your own words. Do not cut and paste. If you cut and paste, I'll know you cut and pasted. don't do it. Write it in your own words. You need to get used to and practice reading the law, processing the law, and then being able to communicate the law. And a lot of times you're going to communicate that law verbally, but you'll communicate that law verbally after you've summarized it in some form in writing. It's a process. Follow the process. Summarize that case and then type it up in Word or Google Docs. Proofread, check your spelling, grammar. Make sure it sounds good because you're presenting it to somebody else. And then your final steps. After typing and proofreading your case summary, type out the steps you recorded for how you found and completed that part of the assignment. Organize in an explanatory manner and include that information following your case summary. Now you have a document with two parts of your assignment, part 1 and 3. Proofread the document at least one more time. When you're satisfied, save it as a PDF file that includes your name, a reference to the assignment, and the file name. And I gave you an example on the assignment. Save it as a PDF and post it as a PDF. If you don't post it as a PDF file, it doesn't count. If it's not filed in the way that I tell you to file it in that way, doesn't count. It's as if you didn't turn it in. Post your PDF file to the forum by noon on Friday. Do not open anyone else's document until after that deadline, and that's going to be a rule in every single course. If you open the document, and I will be able to tell if the document was opened before noon on Friday, anyone else's document, the assumption is going to be that you looked at their document, and we're going to consider that cheating. And you're going to get a 0 for that entire assignment. And if you've read the syllabus, that's 2 weeks worth of work. So not just for week 1, but for week 2 as well. And any chance at getting an A in this course, out the door. So don't do it. Don't look at anybody else's work until after the deadline. That's going to be a rule. After the deadline and before class next week, we meet at 6 p.m. on Zoom. Again, the link is on Blackboard. Perform a self-assessment. And the criteria for the self-assessment is on Blackboard. It's under the courses guide, course guides, resources and documents section of Blackboard. Go there, follow it step by step, do those things, post that as a reply to your initial assignment post. And that's what you're going to do for this week. And then be sure to complete the reading for next week. Check that assignment and the pre-class assignments for next week. And that'll be posted and available on Blackboard towards the end of week 1, at least by Friday at noon. So that's your week 1. This is your week 1 guide. I hope you find it helpful. It's definitely something that takes some effort on my part. It's something that you'll have other instructors providing this type of effort towards, but I think it'll be helpful if you use it in the right way. I also think that you'll do well on the assignment if you follow the steps. All right. When we meet on Monday, this is the expectation and one of the reasons for this guide. Rather than spend the time essentially doing this while you're sitting in your living room or your dining room or your bedroom or wherever and lecturing like we would in class, we had moved away from that in the paralegal program before COVID-19. We had essentially done what I'm doing here, flipped our courses. So you had an expectation at the time, it was only the podcast, it wasn't a video, to listen to that podcast and then come to class prepared to review parts of an assignment that you had completed and to be ready to complete an assignment, the rest of an assignment for that week. So this isn't new because we're in this environment. It actually should work out a lot better if you take the time to watch this video each week and listen to the podcast. One or the other. Do one or the other. If you don't, you're going to show up on my screen. And again, I've got this big TV that my wife and I attached to the wall. That's your classroom. And you'll show up there like the kids on the Brady Bunch. And I'll be able to tell, just like I could tell in class, that you weren't prepared. You want to be prepared in all paralegal courses. It's why we're here. You want to be employed as a paralegal. To get there, follow the map. Do what we tell you, follow the guide. If you're prepared, you'll get there. If you're not prepared, it's no skin off my teeth. You're not hurting me. You're wasting your time. Because what will happen is, by the 4th week, I'll be probably suggesting you drop the class. By the 8th week, it'll be too late. It's doable, but I got to be very open, and you want me to be very open and honest about expectations. If you do these things in a short period of time, you're going to be contact me, say, hey, Professor Higgins, can I use you as a reference because I want to seek an internship or I want to get a job? A lot of our students, and especially in the last few years, and including this year, they're ending up employed before they finish the program. When they're towards the end of the program, they're going out and finding a job because the jobs are available. So you're going to want us to be references, and you're going to want to have the skills. If you don't have the skills by that point, somebody calls me for a reference, I can say, yep, they're enrolled in the program. But if you have developed the skills and you put in the time and effort, then what I say is, this person can do the job. I sell you. I'm your biggest cheerleader. And I like to be your biggest cheerleader. So I hope if this is something you really want to do, and it's not for everybody. If you get, this is a rubber meets the road course. If you get in here and determine, I don't like this. I can't do this. I don't want to do this. You don't want to put in the time. If you don't want to put in the time, that's a great indicator that this isn't for you. It's not the career for you. And that's okay. It happens to a few students every semester. This is a rubber meets the road course. This is a course where if we're going to lose students, it's in this course. And you'll see at the end of the semester, people who aren't in this course any longer that began the semester in this course. That's okay. If you do intend to be in this course and you really want an opportunity for a career in the law, put in the time and know that it's going to take more time at the beginning of the semester than any other course, a lot more time. Put in that time and effort. By the end of the semester, you'll be, telling me that I told you so because I'm telling you so. You'll be doing things that you never imagined yourself doing this week like that. I'll see you on Monday. And then each Monday thereafter. Stay well, wear your mask, keep your distance, wash your hands,